How on earth does a world still reeling from the most brutal war in human history end up in an even bigger, deadlier one just 20 years later? Well, today we're going to trace that exact path. It's a story of broken promises, crazy ambition, and a so-called peace that was really anything but.
So, picture this. It's 1938, and you're looking at British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain. He's just stepped off a plane, he's waving a piece of paper signed by Adolf Hitler, and he's telling a cheering crowd that he has secured peace for our time. For one tiny, hopeful moment, it really looked like he'd done it. He'd stopped a war before it even began.
Yeah, that peace? It didn't even last a few months. Hitler completely lied. German tanks just rolled into the rest of Czechoslovakia, tearing that agreement to shreds. And that one moment, that shocking betrayal, really sums up the whole era. It makes you ask, how did everything go so catastrophically wrong?
To really get the Second World War, you have to rewind back to the end of the First. See, the treaty that ended that war, it didn't create a stable peace. It was more like a really fragile ceasefire that left the whole continent just simmering with anger and ready to boil over.
You basically had this perfect recipe for a dictator brewing in both Italy and Germany. Now, Italy was technically on the winning side, but they felt totally cheated, like they didn't get the land they were promised. Germany, on the other hand, was just crushed, humiliated by defeat, and forced to pay these impossible war debts. In both countries, you had economies in free fall and people losing all faith in their weak governments. It created this desperate hunger for a strong leader, literally anyone who would just promise to make them proud again and fix all their problems.
And right on cue, as if from central casting, those strong leaders appeared. We're going to see three men in three different countries who grabbed all of that chaos and anger and used it to seize power, setting the entire world on a collision course for war. Let's meet them.
First up, from Italy, is Benito Mussolini. And this guy, wow, he was a walking contradiction. He started out as this anti-war socialist. He even fled the country to dodge the draft. But then he does a complete 180, becomes this super passionate nationalist, and gets kicked out of the Socialist Party. So he just invents his own thing, fascism. It's this powerful mix of extreme nationalism and military worship, and he promises to build a new Roman Empire. And then, in 1922, he and his followers literally march on Rome, and in this just wild power play, the king caves and just hands him the government.
Okay, so next up is Germany. And if Italy felt cheated, Germany was just absolutely shattered. The Treaty of Versailles took away huge chunks of their territory, demilitarized their industrial heartland, slashed their army down to basically a police force, banned them from having an air force at all, and then slapped them with these insane war payments that they could never, ever hope to pay. It was a national humiliation on an unimaginable scale.
And into all of this anger and despair steps Adolf Hitler. He was a war veteran, and he knew exactly how to tap into the nation's rage. He'd give these electrifying speeches, promising to rip up that hated treaty, rebuild the military, and make Germany great again. And for a people who felt completely broken, that message was like a drug. By 1933, he was the Chancellor of Germany.
Meanwhile, halfway across the world, Japan is on its own path. See, after being isolated for centuries, American warships basically forced them to open up for trade. And as they looked around, they saw all these Western powers colonizing Asia. So their leaders decided, hey, if we don't want to get colonized, we better become the colonizers. As an island, they needed resources like oil and rubber, and their powerful military government believed they were superior to everyone else. So Japan set its sights on building a massive empire of its own.
Okay, so the stage is set. You've got these three aggressive, expansionist powers ready to go. The big question is, what did the rest of the world, the supposed good guys who won World War I, do about it? Well, the answer for way too long was not much.
You have to understand, everything Hitler did at first was driven by one single obsession: destroying the Treaty of Versailles. Every early move he made was a calculated risk, basically just poking the Allies to see what he could get away with.
So he just flat out announces he's building a new air force, the Luftwaffe, total violation of the treaty. Then he brings back the draft to build a huge army, another violation. Then he marches his army back into the Rhineland, which was supposed to be a demilitarized zone. And what did the Allies do in response to these blatant violations? Crickets, zilch, absolutely nothing.
This inaction eventually became an actual policy called appeasement. And it worked just like this. It was this crazy repeating cycle. Hitler would demand something, the Allies would say, no, you can't have that, And then they'd say, okay, fine, you can have it, but that's it, no more. Of course, it was never it.
And so it goes again and again. In 1938, German troops just roll into Austria and annex it. No one stops him. His next target is a German-speaking part of Czechoslovakia called the Sudetenland. So Britain and France fly to Munich, and they decide to just give it to him, sacrificing the Czechs in exchange for that piece of paper promising peace.
Feeling unstoppable now, Hitler locks in two major alliances. First is the Pact of Steel, making his military alliance with Mussolini's Italy official. But then came the real bombshell, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. This was a deal with his absolute arch-enemy, the Communist Soviet Union. Publicly, it was just a promise not to attack each other, but secretly, they agreed to invade Poland together and split it right down the middle.
With the Soviets now looking the other way, nothing was stopping him. On September 1, 1939, German panzers stormed across the border into Poland. This was it, the line in the sand. Britain and France had promised to defend Poland, and this time they had to keep their word. The age of appeasement was officially over.
So after Poland fell, this weird, eerie quiet fell over Europe. People called it the phony war. The Allies were mobilizing, but nobody was really fighting. Don't be fooled, though. This was just the calm before a storm like no one had ever seen. Hitler was about to unleash a whole new way of fighting.
The difference in thinking between the two sides was just staggering. On one side, you have France basically getting ready to refight World War I. They're relying on static trenches, horses to move supplies, even motorcycle messengers. And on the other side, you've got Germany's Blitzkrieg, lightning war. It was all about speed and shock, using tanks and planes together, all connected by radio, to just punch a hole in the enemy line and create total chaos.
So when the Germans finally attacked in the West, the Allies rushed north into Belgium to meet them, thinking they knew where the fight would be. But it was a trick. The real main attack, the main armored punch, came smashing through the Ardennes forest, a hilly, dense area the French thought was totally impassable for tanks.
And bam! Just like that, German tanks were behind the Allied armies, cutting them off completely. The best troops Britain and France had were now trapped, pinned against the coast with nowhere to go. It led to that miraculous, desperate evacuation from the beaches of Dunkirk. With its best armies gone, France just collapsed. The Germans swept across the country and marched into Paris. In just 6 weeks, Hitler did what the German Empire couldn't do in 4 years of brutal trench warfare. France had fallen. The fall of France was a shockwave that rocked the entire world. Hitler was the master of Western Europe. And now, only Great Britain, led by the incredibly stubborn Winston Churchill, stood alone against the Nazi juggernaut. Now, to invade Britain, Hitler had to control the skies. So the German Luftwaffe started pounding the British Royal Air Force bases day after day. And it was working. The RAF was on the ropes, almost broken. But then, after a small British raid on Berlin, a furious Hitler made a huge, fateful mistake. He ordered his bombers to stop attacking the airfields and start bombing London instead. And while the Blitz was terrifying for civilians, it gave the RAF's battered airfields just enough time to repair and regroup. It was the breathing room they needed to ultimately win the Battle of Britain. So, Britain survives. They've won a critical battle for their own skies, and the immediate threat of invasion is gone, for now. But you have to see the bigger picture. They are an island of defiance in a Europe that is almost completely dominated by the swastika. They are utterly alone. Hitler had been stopped, but he was far from defeated. And a guy like Hitler, well, he doesn't just sit still. So with his plans for Britain on ice, the entire world held its breath, wondering and asking one terrifying question: where was he going to strike next?